Okay, first thing I do is give a two-piece blank. I would find the center where the two pieces are glued together. You can see where the glue joint should be when you look on the ends. You can see the glue joint right here. Go ahead and make a mark on top. And we'll go ahead and run a straight line down here. And that just comes in handy for when you're going to put this on. So then we're going to put the template on. You'll go ahead and you'll line up your template with the center line. Your template should have a center line or a notch that shows the center line. And then we'll take the base of the template and bring it up about 1/8 of an inch. And then go ahead and just trace your whole template. All right, that looks pretty good. So when you're done, your template basically just have a drawing of your guitar on top of your piece of wood. So then go ahead and drill some holes in this thing. Okay, I realized that the glare didn't make it easy to see, so I retraced it with a Sharpie, and you can now see that you just want like 1/8 of an inch here at the bottom, because when we trim this back, we'll cut just outside the line about 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, depending on what you can get with your saw. And then we'll use the template to use a router. It's easier if we take a bunch of wood off first. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to drill a bunch of holes with a 3/8 inch drill bit or somewhere close. And we're going to drill holes wherever there's a tight curve. Here, here, up here, over here, in here. That is so that we can turn the jigsaw blade around without breaking it. Alright, so when we drill our holes, you want to try and hold the drill as straight as possible. And then you're just going to drill through, and you're going to drill your hole about, like I said, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch outside of where the line is. Alright. Also, make sure when you're drilling your holes, what's underneath. You see I pulled the blank off of this table a little bit so the drill bit didn't drill into the table when it went through. So you want to keep that in mind, that your drill bit isn't going to hit anything when it goes through the wood. You'll drill like 1/2 inch to 1 inch at a time, and then you just need to pull the drill bit out so the wood chips can clear. Once the wood chips clear, you just push it back through. Alright, so you can see all the holes we drilled. We'll see if that ends up being enough for us to drill a few more. But now what we'll do is we'll use the saw to go ahead and whittle this down to a little bit smaller pieces. Okay, we're going to switch to the jigsaw now. Xander, I know you have a green Hitachi one, and on the front of it is a little black lever. Looks kind of like this one's a silver lever, but yours is going to be black. You pull that open, and you take this jigsaw blade with the teeth pointing towards the front, like if you were pushing it where you'd cut. You're going to just insert it into that opening there. Push it all the way in. Make sure the back of the blade lines up with your rollers so it's in the center. Let go of that lever. Make sure it's in there good. And you're ready to cut. So let's make sure you put your eye protection and your ear protection on. And we're going to go ahead and just cut anywhere from 1/8 inch to 3/8 of an inch outside this line. Now these long bits, they don't turn well, so that's why we cut these holes. So I'm going to start back here. I'm just going to run a cut in to that hole and try and stay just outside that line. So it's obviously a little slow going. You can see though that we were able to make this the wide turn with this blade. So it's not too terribly bad. So keep that in mind. You're just going to have to see what your blade's capable of. And that's about as far as you're going to get before you have to kind of wait for it to cool down a little bit. I know that I can smell the wood starting to burn, so you'll kind of know when it's getting too hot. May as well go ahead and keep going. We'll cut the other side, cut around the front, and then we'll move on to the next step. guitar shape. So next step, we're gonna go ahead and double stick tape that template back on top, and we're gonna start routering around it. Okay, so now we're gonna put on our double-sided tape. One side should already be sticky, and the other side is not. Now the easiest way to do this is just put it somewhere in here. Take some scissors. You definitely want to make sure it's inside your line somewhere. And then just put a matching piece right on the other side. And we'll snip that off. And here's the hard part. It is a pain in the butt. But you gotta figure, you gotta get this little piece of red plastic protective film off. And that is not always easy. So I'll just start there in the corner and kind of just play with it until you get a little bit coming, and get some started. Go down and start this one. That way that doesn't fill up with sawdust while we're getting the other one done. Alright, well, almost of it. I mean, this is probably about all you're going to need is these two pieces. This stuff is really strong. I just started using it recently. I used to screw these templates on. So now you're going to need to hold this up a little bit. Line it up with your lines that you should still have on here because you cut outside them. And once you got it lined up, just drop that down and press that good in there. Let's see. Now you have that Telecaster template with the cutout, so you might have to use a few more pieces of tape because you've got that really thin edge along the one side, and you might need to put several little pieces along that edge. Otherwise, the problem when you router that thin piece, when you push against it, the router bearing will start to flex that in and out, and you can end up with a wavy side then instead of a smooth side. All right, that's on there good. You can see that the template is holding in place. We'll go ahead and grab our router. And for this purpose, I'm gonna use the same router as you. We're gonna use this bit. It's, mine's obviously used, but yours will look like that. And you should have got a little adapter with your router. We're gonna need that. That shank will fit in here. So you'll put that in to where that's about flush. You don't want this to be past the end when you stick it in. So we'll do that. And then if you haven't figured this out already, you open this up, you hold this down, and you pull that back. Make sure it's unplugged. Turn it counterclockwise and it'll pull right out. And that makes it easier to get this tightened up. There should have been wrenches that came with yours. And we're gonna go ahead and using your fingers to keep that from going all the way past, put that into where the front of this bushing is basically flush with that. And then we'll go ahead and tighten it by hand tight. And then using our wrenches, we'll go ahead and tighten this the rest of the way. All right, now that I found my wrenches, so try to keep your wrenches with the tool so you don't end up like me. You're just gonna go ahead and one backs it up and the other one just tightens, and obviously you can tell just by it getting tight. And that's gonna be your wrench configuration. Small one's gonna get the flats on the shaft, and then this one grabs the nut, and we'll tighten that down. And now make sure, a few words of safety, you should always wear your safety glasses and ear protection with this thing. And you're going to want to keep your fingers away from the sharp spinny thing. And remember, when you turn this on and off, when you stop routering and you turn this off, this is going to spin for a few seconds longer. So just make sure that you don't really want to move the router once you turn it off until you know it stops spinning. And you should be able to hear it. Once it stops spinning, you should be fine. Now we're going to go ahead and push this back in. And there it is on the front, a little arrow. And there's an arrow here. And you line those arrows up, push that down, come back here, you push this, and well, usually you push that. There we go. Oh, okay. It won't come down because the router bit's all the way down. So now, go ahead and, easiest way to do this is, you want the bearing to be at the height of the template. So I'm gonna put it towards the top of the template. Clamp that clamp down, and that'll secure the router. And you can see about where that bearing's gonna be. And so you wanna use your shortest of these straight bits, because this is the worst cut, this first cut. The router's gonna wanna kick back a little bit. So keep in mind, that bit is going to spin this way. So we are going to push the router this way, around and around. Now, you got to be real careful when we get to like this end here. You'll want to put most of your weight on your inside hand, because you're going to see that this is going to get real tippy when it gets out here, and it's going to tip. You know, we don't want to tip, because if you tip it, then that bit's going to cut into the side instead of cutting it straight and flush. So I'm going to move the camera around here real quick. So you're going to want to hold this in. I put my hand here and hold this knob down so that this part is pushing down real tight against here. And then since that bearing is just pivoting, just let the machine pivot around this horn. And then once you're back here, it's going to be stable again. It's going to be stable. And then you're going to have the same problem here. So just keep this knob towards the inside and keep pulling it tight right there. My finger, let's just keep it tight here and just pivot the router around. Pivot the router around. And we'll watch it go all the way around. Then once you get back to where you started, you can turn the router off. And we'll lower the bit and do a little bit more work. Okay, so when you start this router up, you want to be in position here, but you don't want the bit against the wood or it'll kick back on you. So you just gotta make sure that it's sitting here on there nice, but the bit is not touching. So this router is a little tricky. It's the only thing I don't like about this router, and that is the power on switch is right here. You'll want to set it a fairly fast RPM. I'm gonna put my ear protection on. Bit's not against the wood. Running. Okay, you can see how that took a little while to wind down. So if you have a shorter bit, you should use the shorter bit. You can tell just looking at this, that was, and you could hear it too. That's a lot of wood to take at one time. Be better if we could have taken about half of that. But if that's the shortest bit you have, that's what you have to use. So you can see though, it started to chip out in a few places, but it will be just fine when the finished product comes around. So also I'll mention right now, don't be upset if you make a mistake. If your router gouges something, you make a nick, this wood, we can fix almost anything before the end product, so don't get mad, just work around it and let me know if you have a problem. You can take a picture and send it to me. But that's where we're at right now. The most important thing is just keep yourself safe, so make sure you keep your body away from the spinning part and keep the power cord out of the way of the spinning part. So now, basically you're gonna take the same bit, we're just gonna lower it. So I don't use this router a lot, so you can read your manual. This should be able to lower it micrometerly, small amounts at a time. But I think it's easier to just pull this clamp open. It'll drop down, of course, but then we just adjust it to where we want it. So I would say we want to take about 1/4 of an inch. Let's just line it up so that the bearing is even with the bottom of our template. That way we know we're still going to hit the template, and we're going to take about, not quite, 1/4 of an inch more wood off. So go ahead and give. So you should be able to see that we took a little bit more off, and you could hear it just went so much smoother, not taking so much wood, right? You can hear the router doesn't bog down, and that's what you want to do. So on this next one, you have the option, you can either take the template off and leave the same bit in, but I prefer to go ahead and just get a longer straight bit. And then I keep the template on and just keep trimming it down. So I'm going to go ahead and change bits now, and then we'll move on to the rest of the project. All right, so definitely be careful changing the bits. I cut myself a little bit when I was changing the bit. All right, so we're going to keep the template on for this one, and we got a little longer bit, so you can see that we're going to take another 1/4 inch. And you can see, hopefully, you can see where the bearing still touches that template. What we don't want is we don't want it to get anywhere where it could get wedged in where the gap from the tape is. So just make sure that that bearing touches the top of that template and you'll be good. Take another 1/4 inch now. And we're just going to keep working our way around. Okay, so now we've cut deep enough for sure that we can go ahead and take this template off. So this is where it gets tricky, especially with your fragile template that you have. I like to use a putty knife. So there's that gap. We can get in here. We gotta somehow pry that away. This is the hardest part, trying to pry open. This putty knife's actually not strong enough for this one. You don't want to break your template and you don't want to damage your wood. And that's where this can get a little bit tricky. So sometimes a long bladed flathead screwdriver works really well too. So I have to go find one. Okay, so I grabbed a few things. So if you got a long flathead screwdriver, this one's off a chainsaw, you get that in there. You get it in with the flat edge flat, and then you can kind of just turn it. And I'm going to stick this in as a spacer. See where we got that. Turn that back. Same thing down here. Stick this in as a spacer. And now I'm going to do the other side, see if we can get this thing to break loose. Kind of hear it slowly. It's kind of, you can hear the tape start to break. There we go. And voila. Unfortunately, we gouged that a little bit, but we have to sand it out, so we'll sand out all the gouges. If there's any deep ones, we'll fill them with a little bit of Bondo. And then once you do that, you can take the tape off of your template pretty easily. Just kind of pulls right off. And if you have another project going right away, you can reuse this. But if you don't have it right away to use, it'll just get bad. So just start with a new fresh piece next time. But now you can see why we don't like to use too much of this tape. Whew, all right. Now, what we'll do, same thing. So you can see where we already routed. That's where we're going to want the bearing. So now we'll just have the bearing sit against a part we already routed. But I don't want to cut that deep. So what we'll do is take that loose, pull that up, tighten it back down, and we'll have about another 1/4 inch cut. You can see the bearing is going to ride along the top of this guitar blank. And that bearing will just follow it along just like it was the template. The body itself is now the template. So you kind of see how that's going to work. And we'll get started. looks good. It trimmed right up. So we're just going to continue to do that and lower this router bit. And take another 1/4 inch. And we're just going to take 1/4 inches until we get down to about an 1/8 inch left. And then once we have an 1/8 inch left, we'll switch and do something different because we don't want to cut into our table. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this out to that point. I'll speed up the video, so if the video looks faster, it's because it is. And then I'll stop it again once we get to where we need to finish it up. Okay, so now what we got left is that little lip. So we flip this over so the lip's on top. We switch to the other bearing style, where the bearing is on the other side. And that way, this one, the bearing runs along the template side still, and the cutter's on top, and you get the same effect. The only problem is this is a little trickier. So this doesn't cut this deep right away, so you kind of have to work the router in and trust that the bearing, once it hits there, will stop and you'll still be flush trimming. So I'm going to go ahead and put this bit in the router and then we'll get started. All right, I like to set it up so that we're using the middle of the cutting bit basically, and the bearings right there in the middle. Everything's solid. And we're going to go around this the same way, same direction, everything. Just remember that you kind of got to use a lighter touch, and we're going to kind of feather the router in to this so that it doesn't take too much at once and cause the wood to split. Okay, so my bit's a little dull. You can kind of tell that's why it burned. We can sand that out between that and the round over when we're done. Should be good. And then, so you see this kind of tears out a little bit. And you try to work this a little slower, but when your bit's a little dull in this style of bit with that much thickness left, that just makes it a little hard. But that'll all sand out. Won't see it in the finished product.